you can't ignore how much more of a presence Michigan is in the state of Illinois. Alan, that has really, really shown up for Michigan the last few years. Of course, most notably with J.J. McCarthy, but they were back active in Illinois again in this cycle.
Yeah, I mean, Sharon Moore deserves a lot of credit there as being the area recruiter. I think you add Mike Elston, who's recruited that area for Notre Dame, and then Steve Klinkscale has some connections there. He's recruited Chicago at some of his other stops. And I do think that when you have some guys on the roster from the state who are doing well, J.J. McCarthy being a very famous example, but also the A.J. Hennings and the Trevor Keegans and guys like that. They got Tyler McLaurin and players like that. I think that created the momentum also. And so I think that's why you have the success there. And there's good players to be had there, as you've seen from this class.
All right, so let's start off first with the highest rated guy from the bunch in Illinois, Deacon Tonielli. Not a guy who talks a lot to the media. As a matter of fact, when I sent Bryce down to see him, he was actually hurt that game. So didn't really see him a ton on the football field live, but a guy is 6'6", 215 who brings you some pass catching ability and size, a nice blend like that you like to see at that position to the fold.
Yeah, he's probably the silent assassin in this class. Probably doesn't get talked about enough because he just isn't out there a lot on social media. He's not right in Chicago either. He's in Oswego, so he's out there a little bit, and so maybe doesn't get the attention he deserves. He's a 4-star for us. And I think when you see some of the things that Michigan has done with Luke Schoonmaker and like Colston Loveland and allowing them to go up and just attack the ball and win some of those battles, that's what this guy can do. I mean, he's split out. They're throwing him a lot of jump balls at the high school level. I think he's got some developing to do as far as putting some weight on that frame and learning to play on the ball a little bit more. But as far as just going up and getting the football, he can definitely do that. And I think the rest of that's going to come. And that's obviously a position Michigan has developed really well also.
All right. Next up that we will talk about is, I guess I'll go according to the rankings. So let's go with Roderick Pierce, the guy that they wound up flipping from Wisconsin. Kind of seemed like it was trending that way, a little bit of intrigue with Illinois. But when Ryan Walters left, I just felt like, man, it was, if there was a clincher, I felt like that was it. But Roderick Pierce, 6'3", 290-pound defensive lineman in the fold for the Maize and Blue.
So people will often blame me for the rankings. And this is where I say I don't have the full power to do everything because Rod Pierce would be higher, honestly. Not to throw the company under the bus, but he'd be a little bit higher if I had my full wishes on this one. But regardless of that, really good player and really made a huge jump between his junior and senior season. I mean, I think the difference in the tape is tremendous. You talk to his high school coaches and they know the differences in him. He carries that 290 very well. If you look at the tapes side by side, and I've done this, there's not it looks like Mason Graham's high school tape. And that's what they're telling him that he's going to play. I think he fits that position very well. I think he also gives you the option to move him around a little bit on the line. He could play some nose. He can play some man. He can do a lot of different things, but you're catching a guy on the rise because he's still improving each time out. And the jump between junior and senior year was tremendous.
And then, of course, Brooks Barr. This was a guy that Mike Elston seemed to identify early in the process as a guy that he really likes, a jumbo athlete, as I call him, along the defensive line. What do you see in Brooks Barr?
I mean, this is a big kid, big all around, big hands, just very strong, powerful. I think he's improved a lot because when we first started evaluating him, he hadn't fully grown into his frame yet. And I think as he's filled in, he had a really, really good senior year and was really a big piece of that for his team. I still can't tell you that he might not get a look at offense at some point. I think he has a lot of upside on that side of the ball, but he also kind of fits the mold of what you look at in an odd front defensive end. So I can see him playing that, but I think he gives you some options. That you got to have a kid that big, that strong. I think he's got upside on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, that's why, he's not a jumbo athlete from the standpoint of being a tight end caliber guy. So, but what I was thinking was I could see him being an offensive tackle, Allen. I mean, I personally, I could see, I could make the argument that his upside would be even greater on that side of the ball, but you kind of let that play out. I think he gives you some versatility in that way. To wait to see how things develop along the defensive line, see how things develop in recruiting along the defensive line. He's a guy that I think can very easily slot in on the other side of the football. Before we move on from Illinois and go over to Ohio, a guy who you said you don't want to throw the company under the bus when talking about Rod Pierce. If I had a vote, if I were involved in the rankings, Jair Hill would be higher. I think Jair Hill is a guy who could be a difference maker wherever he goes. And I have my crystal ball in for Michigan because that's where I think he's going to pick, even though he didn't put them in his in the top 5 that he named. I'm curious what you think about where you think Jair Hill's recruitment is. That's number one. And then number 2, tell me what you think of his game.
So I think, first of all, he's a standout athlete. I mean, he runs 10.8 and 100 meters at almost 6'2", very long. I mean, if you're going to build a corner, it's going to look a little bit like Jair Hill with his length and his athleticism, ball skills. Another guy, I've seen him play twice in person in the last 2 years. Also saw him at the UC Report camp in Kansas City. Outstanding at that, tested very well. And then in the games, made plays as a punt returner. I mean, he's a Steve Clinkscale kind of guy. When Steve was at Kentucky, I saw him come over into Gary and recruit Lonnie Johnson. I think there's some similarities between those two, and Lonnie's still playing in the pros. As far as his recruitment, I'll just say this. There was a period in time where my wife thought I was getting ready to propose, and I was upset that she knew it was coming. So I kept talking about how much I didn't want to get married. And then when I actually proposed, she was really surprised because she had been telling everybody that I had been talking about how much I didn't want to get married. So I don't know how you put those two stories together, but I'll just throw that out there.
I see what you just did there, Alan Trieu. I think that Jair, again, as a corner, I think could be an impact guy. What I don't know, what I can't quantify is, from stepping in and you compare him to a guy like Will Johnson, who's a different athlete, but I'm talking about Will had you knew he, from an early enrollee standpoint and the standpoint of being a guy that, coaches, had been in his ear from the starting point, from 8th grade. He's in contact with college. So you just knew he picking up the scheme it was going to be quicker than most freshmen. And so that's the thing with Jair. Wherever he goes, and I happen to think it's going to be Michigan, it'll just be a matter of how quickly he picks up the scheme. Because once he does, man, I think he's an impact guy.